Welcome to Overtime Inferno, your weekly roundup of all the biggest stories in CSGO, quicker than we could actually record this podcast. If you could rate and review us at the end of the episode, that would really help. My name is Logan Ramhap. Not with me today is AZ-esque because of things. Let's get into it. If you're wondering why this is Thursday and it's 5:30 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States and the podcast still hasn't been updated yet, it's because we're doing it now. Elliot is actually currently running the North American production for the RMR, or system production. He's doing something with the RMR. It sounds impressive or something. And I had to travel for work last week, so there was no episode last week. And then this week, everything got together a little bit too late. So we have a quick overview that I'm going to do. It'll be less funny than normal because obviously I'm less funny than Elliot. But we'll have a quick run through. So the first thing I want to talk about is ESL Pro League. Finals happened this past weekend. They were actually some of the best finals that I think I've seen in a while. We had Vitality and Liquid. Before we get to the finals, though, I wanted to talk about how the rest of the playoffs kind of went out because it was a little bit interesting to see how they happened. Because Liquid got to the finals, and that's kind of weird. To get there, they had to beat Cloud9, MOUZ, and Fnatic. MOUZ and Cloud9 were each having really, really good tournaments. And the only way that Liquid even got into the playoffs was by beating Cloud9 in the groups to prevent them from going 5-0 and to literally keep Liquid in the tournament. So Liquid beating Cloud9 in a best of one and then a best of three just in order to get into the playoffs, right? Two best of players. I think it was two best of threes. We'll go two best of threes. Vitality, on the other hand, had to beat a lot of heavy hitters, right? They got blessed a little bit by the fact that G2 had already kind of dispersed of Navi ahead of time, but beating Outsiders 2-0 and beating G2, again, who had just beat Navi 2-0, is rather impressive. The finals themselves, best of five, went to all 5 games. It reignited is 5 games just way too long for a finals thing, which there's pros and cons in both places. Pros being there's more maps of Counter-Strike, cons being it'll take you 6 hours to get through and no one sits through that whole thing. I myself watched all maps other than Dust 2 and had to jump back to watch Dust 2 at a later point because I could not take watching the entire thing. But every map was really good. Liquid seemed extremely competitive. OC, after not being able to find his way in the group stage, managed to find his footing in playoffs and became a very, very good piece of this team. There were times where Yakindar just didn't seem like the player as expected. And normally I wouldn't bring that up, but I think it's important to bring it up because the rest of Liquid just started existing at that point, right? When one player fell, it was next man up mentality, and it seemed like if someone wasn't firing, everyone else was. There was a game or two where Nitro was the absolute carry for the beginning of the game because he was the next man up. It's good to see Liquid in decent form again. Vitality, I more just want to mark on the fact that we have been saying that replacing the 5th man on Vitality, or on any team for that matter, doesn't really help you that much because you're replacing the 5th person. I think Spinks is kind of changing that a little bit on our perspective there. Yes, ZywOo didn't need to have a generational event in which he had an average. Let me say this again: an average rating during the finals of 1.39, which is insane. But Spinks absolutely held up his end of the bargain and absolutely did a really, really good job playing the roles that he needed to play. Definitely looks like an upgrade from Masuda. Other things that are going on right now. I just talked about Elliot actually being on the RMR. So let's talk about the RMR. So America first, because I'm here and I get to run the show. After Thursday's day of stuff, Liquid is officially through to the major, and Evil Geniuses, surprisingly, 3-0 to get to the major. Some of this stuff is like not super impressive. Like them beating Nouns is not that impressive. Them beating 9Z in a best of 3 is a little bit more impressive. But Furia, a win over Furia on Nuke though, very impressive from the side of Evil Geniuses. hope to see that they keep this up into the major. No South American, including Brazilian, team has qualified yet, so obviously NA greater than Brazil. Teams that are on the cusp of qualifying at 2-1, Furia, 0-0 Nation, Complexity, who lost today to Liquid, Pain, ATK is 2-1, and 9Z, who lost to EG today. Teams that are on the cusp of elimination, right? So teams that need to fight for their life at this point. Imperial, after losing to 0-0 Nation with basically every member of the original set of players from the SK Luminasi lineup. Imperial lose to 0-0 Nation, so they're 1-2. Nouns 1-2. MIBR, Isurus, and Team 1. Team 1 and Oplano. Team 1 finally got their win today against Infinity to keep themselves in the tournament. They were 0-2 yesterday, which was brutal. So teams that have been eliminated so far, Arctic and Infinity have both been eliminated. To be fair, I'm not sure that they would have made it either way, no matter what has happened. So I'm kind of okay with them being the first two out. We still have a lot of teams who made the major last time, who could make the major realistically this time. If I was a betting man, which I absolutely am, of the remaining teams, right? Furia makes the major, Complexity makes the major. I've got 2 more slots here. I'm going to go 0-0 Nation and ATK going to come out of nowhere and make the major from America. Let's move on to EU because EU is a little bit more interesting. So EU group, we'll start with Group B because Group A is real weird right now. Group B has gone about as you expected. Na'Vi through 1,000%. They are, in fact, in the major, as you'd hope. Tomorrow, Big and Ents will take on in the 2-0 decider game, third game thing. Basically, Big or Ents will be going to the major tomorrow. Other teams that are still super in contention with 2-1 records: Heroic, Vitality, OG, Maus, and Outsiders. No surprises there. All of these teams should be making the major. This group is actually very, as you'd expect. The teams that are 1-2 right now: Monty, Falcons, K23, Sangal, Heat, Fantasy, Illuminar, and Saw are all 0-2. Nobody is officially kicked out from this group yet, but all of those 2-1 teams should make it. All of the 1-2 and 0-2 teams probably shouldn't make it. If you were to go and rank the teams based on ESL ranking or HLTV ranking or something, this list is basically in order of rank to some degree. So nothing super surprising here. RMRA, though, we have some surprising things. NIP and FaZe are both through with 3-0s. FaZe seem to love overtimes. They went to multi-overtime with Gamer Legion. They went to overtime with Fnatic. Today, taking on Sprout, they had to go to 3 maps. I believe 2 of them were in overtime. We'll talk about Sprout in a minute, but they looked good. But NIP and FaZe are through to the major. So we could see a repeat. We could see the Grand Slam being lifted in Rio with FaZe there now. Not that there was a real doubt of it, but Cloud9, Bad News Eagles, Spirit, B8, OneWin, and Sprout are all 2-1. You may be thinking, who are some of those teams? Well, I'm here to help you. B8 is a full Ukrainian team, other than the coach. They're super young. You almost certainly have never heard of any of the players on this team, but they're beating good teams. They lost to Cloud9 on the first day, but they've beaten the Static and they've beaten Fnatic. They play Sprout to see if they can make the major tomorrow. Sprout themselves have looked really good, right? They were in the 2-0 column after the first day, beating Force, beating Spirit. They lost to FaZe in a 1-2, but they looked really good losing to FaZe. I managed to catch all of that game this morning. Sprout looked really, really good. The addition of Zyphoon from the Copenhagen Flames team, formerly on Astralis Talent, has actually seemed to be a huge, huge benefit to this team. And anyone who thought that Refresh couldn't IGL is probably a little bit wrong. Sprout seem to have a lot of pieces that they're doing very well with. Bad News Eagles continue their good run at majors and major qualifiers as they are looking to qualify tomorrow. They have to beat Spirit. They've beaten Eternal Fire and Astralis. They've just lost to NIP, but NIP 3-0'd to get into the major. One win you may recognize a little bit more than other teams like B8, because one win is a mix of Russian and Belarusian players with Lollipop in there. But the reason you may know this team is because of Flamey, obviously former Na'Vi player, and Deco, who is a brand new player from Russia who has been absolutely destroying. This team has been actually very, very good in this qualifier. They're 2-1. They are trying to qualify for this major, and there's a strong possibility they do. You may be asking yourselves, you've named a lot of teams, Logan, but like you haven't named Fnatic or Astralis or G2. And I'm here to tell you that's because they're in the lower part of this bracket because they've been losing. G2 is 1-2. They won 16-0 against Static day one, who is literally out of the major at this point. They went 0-3. They lost to Cloud9, and then today they lost to OneWin. So tomorrow they have to play Gamer Legion to just continue to possibly qualify. They're in a really, really bad spot, especially after their really good run in Pro League that brought them to the semis, where they had to beat Na'Vi. So hope is that they beat Gamer Legion, but Gamer Legion has been a little bit of a weirdly good team with their new additions of, I believe it's Roy and Suhi. Acor and Suhi, the other Mad Lions player. Yeah, the Fnatic 1-2 is not super insane. They've lost to FaZe and they lost to B8, who's definitely been overperforming and could very well make the major. Seeing Fnatic not at this major would kind of be a disappointment. They've been very all over the place. It seems like the first time we saw Fnatic this year, this new roster, they were world beaters. They were great. They were fantastic. They made playoffs, and then they've gone downhill and they've gone up. It seems like Fnatic's kind of been all over the place. So hoping to see a little bit more consistency out of Fnatic. Eternal Fire is 1-2. They haven't really beaten any great teams. They haven't lost to any great teams. They're just kind of in the middle. They play Fnatic tomorrow, so one of these teams will not make the major. From a storyline perspective, great if Eternal Fire wins that, because Fnatic not at the major would just be yet another disappointment for Fnatic after they haven't had a good couple of years. On the other hand, I want Mezzi in the major, so that's where we're at. The team that I've been struggling to talk about, though, is Astralis, who have a large variety of problems currently. One, they're Astralis, and that in itself is a problem, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, right? Astralis currently does not feel like a very good team. It feels like there's just a lot of missing parts. And there's even more missing parts right now because Config apparently got into a fight at a bar, that's reported by Jackson, and broke his ankle kicking something or someone, and he can't play, or he can't travel reasonably to get to where he's supposed to play. So they're playing with Mistum from their academy team, who has not been the worst, but definitely has not been amazing. But the problem is that normally you'd go, oh, whatever, who cares? Because they have so many other assets like Blame and... Wait, that may be the end of the list of assets, because do we really count Glaive and Zip as assets at this point? And I'm pretty sure at this point Farley may be more of a liability. I'll get back to you on that one. We'll get back to you on that. So Astralis tomorrow have to play against Fours to just make the final, make the major, right? Fortunately, seeding has worked out where G2, Fnatic, and Astralis all don't play the same. They don't play each other. So fortunately, if they win, they'll be in. But they'll be continued to be in. They won't be in the major. They'll be continued to be able to qualify for the major. Would have liked from the scriptwriters to see like Astralis versus G2 or something like that. Forcing one of them to not be in would be a very interesting time. In other news, just generalized news, Endpoint announced MHL a couple hours ago, who had been kind of scrimming with the team for a little bit. TSM is re-entering Counter-Strike for 2023, focusing on a European team. And there's one other thing. There's been reported rumors, and kind of sort of not really, but kind of sort of confirmations that NIP and Astralis have agreed to a deal to send Device back to Astralis for, don't quote me on the number, but I want to say it's 600K, which is a fraction of what he was sent back for previously. NIP just trying to look to get some money back from the failed Device endeavor. Since Device does not want to play for them, and NIP doesn't really want Device right now. They seem to be doing okay, although the age-old rule from this podcast of anytime you think NIP are good, they're going to disappoint you, and vice versa, continues to apply. So that's all we have for this episode. I say we as the global we. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at ReadTLDR, at Mechatronic, and at AZEsk. Even though Elliot's not here, he'll get a plug. Hopefully we'll be back on our normal schedule next week, and you'll be able to hear a British guy making fun of Americans or something.